We'll get back to the college football conversation right now. Joining me right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, senior writer for ESPN.com, co-host of the Marty and McGee, which airs on ESPN Radio and the SEC Network. He is Ryan McGee. He's got a brand new book, Sidelines and Bloodlines, A Father, His Sons, and Our Life in College Football. It just came out this week. Ryan, how you doing on this Saturday?
I'm good. I'm doing great. It's cooling off a little bit down here in my part of the country, and we got these hurricane rains out of here, and we're playing football. So, and they're going to be playing football in your area as well very soon. So it's starting to feel, I guess, as normal as we could possibly ask for during this year.
Absolutely, and I hope you've recovered from your conjugal visit with Marty this morning as well.
All right. Oh, you listened, and I appreciate that. And as soon as that came, so Marty's working the Georgia Tech UCF game today on television, and he was in a hotel room, and it looked like Arrested Development, right? It looked like the trailer outside the prison. And I said conjugal visit. As soon as it left my lips, I went, I think I even said on the air, we might get fired now. But we've said worse, and we still have the gig, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, you guys are a fun wake-up call for me on the SEC Network each Saturday morning. So I enjoy the wake-up call on Saturdays. So.
Well, we've been friends, Marty and I have, for 20 years, and it's just we get done with the show sometimes, and we get out in the parking lot. We look at each other like, I can't believe they let us do that today. And it's we're so thankful that our bosses let us do it, and it's fun. And when you hear Marty and McGee talking on a Saturday morning, that's how we talk just driving up the road if we're going to cover a college football game or a NASCAR race or whatever. And so it's a good time.
Before we get to the book and before we get to some college football conversation, I just want to touch base with you. For those who don't know, you've been working at ESPN since 1994. So, I mean, you fall in the category of an OG because of the fact that, you work from production all the way up. So, what is it like to have worked at ESPN for as long as you've had to see all the transformations and the iterations of the company from then to now?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just the coolest. And I can't, I couldn't believe it the day I walked in the door right out of college as a production assistant, and quite frankly was one of only two Southerners like in the company back then. Me and Reese Davis, that was it. And to still be around and to still have a lot of my great friends there, and even my friends who have left and gone to other networks. Listen, I walk into the offices of the MLB Productions or the NHL Network or the NFL Network, and you name the network, and I know somebody in the building because I just was fortunate to start at ESPN at what I believe was a magical time back in the mid-'90s. I mean, we were only doing 3 sports centers a day, but it was Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann, and Kenny Mayne had just started, and Linda Cohn was doing the 6 o'clock, and Charlie Steiner and Robin Roberts and Mike Tirico, and I think back on, they're all still friends, and they all still check in on me, and it's going to Harvard, when you get a chance to work at ESPN right out of college, and so I'm always thankful for that.
Also, this book is great, Sidelines and Bloodlines. Ryan McGee is the author of the book, and this is such a cool book because of the fact that, college football is a part of so much of your life, and I got to admit, I'm a little jealous because I'm a city kid who loves college football, but you're someone who got to live and breathe and see so many things, and a lot of that you guys document in the book between you and your father and your brother.
Yeah, and the cool part about it was that, I mean, if you can't tell, I'm from the southern part of the United States, and so I grew up going to ACC games and SEC games, and but then my father, when they started the Big East football conference in the early '90s, my dad moved to the Big East, and the reason that he did that was because, I mean, no offense to the schools of the ACC, he'd worked all those games and he'd seen all those places, and so when he moved to the Big East and was there in your neck of the woods, that was the most fun he ever had. I mean, the hottest and the coldest that he ever was officiating a football game were both at the Meadowlands. He had the kickoff classic one year. In fact, I worked for ABC that day, and it was Florida State and Kansas. And it was so hot, Jack Arute literally sweated through his entire suit. I remember seeing him on the sideline. And then years later, my dad had he was back at the Meadowlands. I think it was Duke and Rutgers, and played in a sleet. And my brother was 13 years old, and he had to keep the penalty cards for the officials because it was raining so hard that they couldn't write in pencil on a little piece of paper. And so, but going to Boston College and going to Syracuse, and back then the Big East officials worked Notre Dame games, and so it was Army Navy. I mean, it was an incredible time, and he's always been thankful for his time up there.
From your perspective, how much of writing this book was not just an opportunity for you to like tell stories and give out information about, your dad and you and, just this whole family experience with college football, but how much of it also was for you to maybe put out there just in general, the love of college football from a family to maybe people out there who are maybe not as diehard about college football, to maybe kind of, bring them into the fold a little bit of the college football world?
Yeah, and it's just, I don't care who your favorite team is, what your favorite sport is. Chances are the reason that you love it is because your dad loved it, or your granddad loved it, or your parents loved it. And, you might love the Jets because your dad took you to Jets games as a kid, or, I think it's that way for any sport. And so for my brother and I, it was college football. And growing up in the Southeast, college football, it's no secret, is such a huge part of the fabric. And it was interesting you mentioned when I went to ESPN. When I moved to Connecticut in the mid-'90s, the NFL was a part of my life, but I didn't understand how big it was. Because in the Southeastern United States back then, we had the Falcons, who nobody cared about, and the Redskins, and that was kind of it. And so we had college football. So when I moved to Connecticut and I couldn't find a college football game on the radio on Saturday, it blew my mind. They're already talking about the Patriots-Bills game, for Sunday. So I love the fact that I got to understand that by moving to the Northeast, and I love it when all of my friends from the Northeast who moved to Charlotte, where I live now, they get to see, how big of a part of college football is our culture down here. And so I love it all. And yeah, I mean, my dad was taking my brother and I to college football games before we barely walked. And I had my first sideline credentials when I was 13 at the University of Virginia. Got run over by a North Carolina linebacker. And that's kind of how I learned the game. And part of the book, too, is, quite honestly, is humanizing officials a little bit. Listen, I'm not an idiot. I know you're not going to read the book and suddenly just fall in love with referees. But I think that hopefully by the end of the book you'll understand how hard they work and how much they really, truly love the game, because they're not making any money and they're not going to be famous. Infamous is probably what's going to happen to them. And so you have to love it to do that every Saturday.
The book is Sidelines and Bloodlines, A Father, His Sons, and Our Life in College Football. Ryan McGee joining me here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Ryan, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little college football conversation here on this weekend as we got games kicking off all over the place. I got to start with the Big Ten because this schedule just came out. And the first thing I saw on this schedule that popped out to me was Michigan at Minnesota. The first thing that came to my mind is, wait, Minnesota basically furloughed their entire athletic department. They got to get all those people back in the building because the game's in a few weeks.
Yeah, no, I thought about that too. And you're seeing everybody suddenly turn around and run back to the building, whether they've been furloughed or whether they decided, well, I'm not going to do anything. I better take my vacation now because we're going to be doubling up, tripling up, quadrupling up on sports in the spring. And now all of a sudden they got to get back in the building. And now the guy that you told your SID that you said, well, we don't need you this fall. Well, now we really need you this fall. And so, and not only that, it's players who had opted out. We've already seen several of the guys at Ohio State who had opted out, and now they're trying to opt back in, and some already have. And so, yeah, it's crazy. And I tell you, it's a tightrope they're going to walk. I mean, I'm glad they're coming back, but to play, 8+1 games in 9 weeks, and there's no bye weeks. And what have we learned from the schools who have tried to play so far? Poor Baylor, 3 times now have tried to play their home opener and haven't played one yet. And so there will inevitably be delays. There's going to be kids who test positive, and teams are going to have to miss games. And so you hope that you go 9-0 and win the Big Ten, but chances are you might just play 7 or 8 games.
Yeah, I was incredibly disappointed that now we don't get to see Aranda versus Holgerson in that game today. But like you said, it's 2020. And speaking with the Big Ten, because, we are here in Big Ten country, a lot of Penn State, a lot of Rutgers folk, also a lot of West Virginia folk in this part of the country, Ryan. You look at the Big Ten, it just feels like even if they get all 8 of those games in, how much is that going to be, for lack of a better term, quality football? Because we're also seeing all around college football that some of these teams, they're not 100% ready week 1.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, I go back to Navy, and, Navy is always the most buttoned up, ready to go team with that offense that they run. And, I mean, heck, it's the Naval Academy. And they were so not ready for that opening game against BYU. It was embarrassing, and the coaching staff admitted as much because they were trying to run non-contact practices in the name of safety. And so, it's really going to be interesting. I always give the SEC a lot of credit, not just because I do a show on the SEC Network, but because I really believe this. The fact that they were going last and not playing games until August 20 or September 26th, I thought was so smart because they're watching everything else that's happening, whether it's stadium protocols or whether it's testing protocols, and plus everything changes so dramatically. And so the Big Ten kind of accidentally, 100% accidentally, by coming back not till late October, they will have, in theory, an advantage of having seen what's happened with these other teams and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And the testing is so much better now than it was even a month ago. And so that's what they have going for them. And quite frankly, it's what they're banking on because they're thinking they can get an entire season in 2 months. And they're trying to make that playoff, man. That's what it's all about.
We know that Ohio State is arguably the best team in the Big Ten, but who's really number 2? Because, Penn State, if Micah Parsons comes back, that obviously changes a lot for them. Harbaugh, he's not exactly hit expectations up there in Michigan. So who's really the number 2 in the Big Ten?
Well, what I have learned about Wisconsin is right about the time I don't think anything about them, they win 11 games. And so I keep looking at them because, what they do year in and year out is they're just plug and play. They've been running the same offense, it feels like, since the beginning of time. And so and quite frankly, they sit in the right division. And so, they're looking at Minnesota and Iowa and Nebraska and Purdue, and it's kind of a big mush. And so, to me, again, every time I think to myself, well, I'm not exactly sure who's the second best team in the conference, that's typically about the time that Wisconsin starts making a run. And so I would definitely keep an eye on those guys. And, in Penn State, too, I'm a believer in that offense. I believe that there's a staff in place now that has been there for several years for the most part. And, I wouldn't rule them out quite yet, but I've got my eye on those Badgers.
He's Ryan McGee. Make sure you get the new book, Sidelines and Bloodlines, A Father, His Sons, and Our Life in College Football. It is available right now, whether it's a local bookstore, whether it's on Amazon. You can get it everywhere. Of course, you can follow Ryan on Twitter at ESPN McGee. Make sure you check out the Marty and McGee Show on SEC Nation, ESPN Radio on Saturday mornings. As all guests, Ryan appeared today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Ryan, appreciate the time and the conversation.
Hey, always. Call me anytime.